Hello and welcome to She Leads Collective podcast. I'm Mary Gregory and I'm so glad you're here. This podcast is a space for honest conversations about what it really means to lead as a woman today and how we can all show up with more courage, care and clarity. You'll hear from inspiring women, powerful allies and bold truth tellers who are changing the game, not by playing tougher, but by leading smarter, softer and stronger. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the She Leads Collective. What happens when you notice something really small but meaningful that everyone else seems to just accept and you decide to do something about it? Well, sometimes the most powerful business ideas don't come from a grand strategy or from disruption plans. They come from paying attention, from noticing something that doesn't quite make sense and asking, why do we do it this way? I have a great role model as a guest today who is someone who did exactly that. Steph Douglas began her career in brand and marketing, working on major campaigns including the London 2012 Olympics. But it was her very personal moment, becoming a new mum, that sparked an idea. After receiving multiple bouquets of flowers, Steph found herself thinking, this is lovely, but it's not what I need right now. What she needed was care, practical support, something that recognised the reality of that moment. That insight became the foundation for Don't Buy Her Flowers, a business built on thoughtful, compassionate gifting, rooted in truly understanding the person on the receiving end. What's particularly interesting about Steph's journey is that it didn't start with a grand business plan. It started with a blog, a community and a conversation. And from there, an idea that grew, firstly focused on new mums and then expanding as more people connected with the underlying need. Today, Don't Buy Her Flowers as a business has navigated rapid growth, significant challenges, and more recently, acquisition by a larger organisation, while still staying grounded in its core values. In this conversation, we're going to be exploring what it takes to turn a simple human insight into a successful business, how you stay connected to your purpose as you scale, and what leadership really looks like when things don't always go to plan. Steph, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you giving up your time.
It's a pleasure. It's lovely to talk to you.
Great. Well, let's start right at the beginning, the foundation to what happened later. You had a strong career in brand and marketing, first of all. What do you think that world gave to you?
Oh, I think probably putting the customer at the focus of what you're doing. I think that's the key to any good marketing. So I actually, my first job in marketing was in government communications. So it wasn't selling a product, it was communicating and I guess trying to influence behavior. So it could have been the smoking ban or army recruitment or, education thing like messaging. So yeah, I think that massively, I suppose if you have a kind of marketing brain, that's how your brain works, I think. And so I think that was a big contributor, but also the role I had was very much integrating large teams. So within marketing disciplines, so taking the PR, the media spend, the designs, the artwork, the employee engagement, like all of the different things within a company. And my job was to pull all those things together and make sure the messaging was really coherent. And some of that was also working for government, but working with local governments that were local government agencies that were like putting those messages out locally, but trying to get them to use whatever the messaging was nationally and so it was all a coherent whole. So I guess there was a lot of communication involved, working with stakeholders, persuading people, working with people, listening to people, all of that, which I think is probably my kind of key skill.
Okay, so that sounds like you had the opportunity to work in that space, but also develop those skills. And I suppose what I'm wondering is, looking back, did those skills and experience help you when you actually decided to step out and set up your own business?
Yeah, definitely, because I think obviously putting the customer right at the focus, and that's very much, Don't Buy Her Flowers was born of an idea that was all about how I felt, um, and and it translated that lots of people also found motherhood quite a shock when it first arrives, and then in turn there are lots of occasions when people are overwhelmed, and there's a better gift than flowers. So that has kind of become that core idea that's kind of grown into something that's much bigger than the initial idea, but all starts with that custom, that insight and that feeling that sits right at the heart of it. But yeah, but they're definitely then having to, when I started Don't Buy Flowers, and there's no team and there's no budget and there's no people, and having to go, okay, so I've got to pull all of these different elements together. So I guess it was broader than just marketing, but that core um, training ground really helped me.
Yes, it sounded like in your career, in your job,
Mm.
that you had a level of complexity of many different stakeholders
Yes,
and
yeah,
people invested that you had to communicate with.
yeah,
And absolutely, that was then translated in a different way, but it was still very similar in
yeah,
terms of setting up your own
yeah.
business.
And I really thinking about how people receive your messages and being aware of that. And I suppose to into the detail, like if you're talking about gifting for new mums, but also talking about gifting for bereavement, which could also be baby loss, which could also be someone just having a terrible time at work. There's all those things, having being able to jump between those things, but also I guess have a filter over whatever you're saying and communicating to make sure that you're not using the wrong language, you're not going to upset anybody, you're being really empathetic and thoughtful in all of our communications. Again, I think thinking again about different stakeholders, I guess, but customers or people and groups of people and how they might receive different
Yes.
messages.
And I get even the name of your business, Don't Buy Her Flowers, is kind of that
Mm.
stands out because it's a reworking of a very common statement that we made, like go buy her some
Yeah,
flowers or whatever. No, don't buy her
yeah,
flowers on
yeah.
this occasion.
Yeah. Well, also when we launched, we had I hadn't really thought about it, which sounds ridiculous, but it was to me it was gifts for new mums. So it wasn't like I was trying to take over the flower market, and it was really clear. And it was about in particular that moment when you've had a baby and you're receiving flowers and you're completely overwhelmed and everything's sore and you're trying to figure out who you are and what you do and all those things. And so I just thought it was a really odd gift to give someone. But that the name Kate obviously came from that. And when we launched, we must have been put on like a, because obviously it was me in my spare room with no budget. I think I had three customers, and but we must have been put onto like a Facebook group with florists because they got really angry. So I was getting all these messages, and my husband came home on like the first day, the day after I put the website live, and I was like crying in the kitchen. I was like, I think we've made a terrible mistake. And he was like, no, this is business. You've got to toughen up. And actually, I've had loads of conversations since with florists who've said, yeah, there's certain occasions when flowers aren't the best gift. And that's been really interesting because I'm not trying to destroy an industry. It is very much about those times when you're trying to be more thoughtful and you're trying to be, and also the flower market is so big that actually you probably will still get flower. If you're a new mum, you're probably still getting flowers, but if you're the person that wants to send something really thoughtful and that person, then we can do better, is my view. So
Well, you started telling us about the story behind setting up the business. Tell us a bit more about that. So, I mean, what I heard you say was when you had your son, you got loads and loads of flowers, and then you thought this can be
yeah,
done differently. Tell us more about
yeah.
why that stayed with you, and then what caused you to then move into setting up your business.
So these flowers kept arriving, and I had no expectation. And obviously, it was people. They were well meant, and it was people being kind. So it might, I had, just gone on maternity leave from a job in marketing. So lots of agencies, like people were spending money. So they'd be these massive bouquets. I didn't have any I had two vases. We just had got married. We had a tiny little house. And so from a practical side, I didn't have anywhere to put them. And also there's only so many bouquets a person needs. But initially I was like, oh, this is lovely. People are, and people sending things for the baby, people sending flowers for me. Um, but just really quickly, I was like, oh God, this is a job. It's another thing to do. It's something to look after. And obviously, if you've just had a baby, you are looking after the most precious thing you're ever going to look after. And that's your priority and your focus. But you're also probably exhausted, probably overwhelmed, finding it quite tough, possibly feeling cross at your partner, which was definitely the case for me, just by hormones, something, I don't know, just resentful, like confused, like, how am I doing this? And so that was where the idea came from. It was like, what you actually need is some TLC, which could be some really good
Mm.
chocolate brown. We do an amazing chocolate brownie sharing slice. It could be biscuits, it could be tea. We do a thermos cup so you could keep your tea hot, because that's something that was like a real insight, that when you have a baby, often you never have a hot cup of tea because for whatever reason you keep putting it down and you never get to drink it hot. And so those really thinking about what those things could be, and to me it seemed quite obvious. And so I was in a phase of life where lots of friends were then starting to have babies. So I would send them a magazine and some chocolate in a jiffy bag. Like, it was that simple, but it was for them. It wasn't for the baby. It wasn't something to do or, baby related. It was just about them. It was a bit of TLC. And I would always accompany it with a card and a message that was like, you're doing a great job. I know this is really tough, because I still remember being in the hospital, and one of my best friends who'd had a baby a few months before, I had no idea what she'd been through in having a baby, because I wasn't in that space yet. It's only when you do it that you go, oh, hang on a minute. Now I understand. And she just sent me a message saying, I'm sure you're doing brilliantly. Just to let you know, I found breastfeeding really hard, and if you're finding it hard, don't worry, it's going to be okay, and it all gets easier. And I just sobbed. I just sat on in the hospital sobbing, like, yeah, I just needed someone to tell me it was going to be okay, and that I wasn't. Because I thought I was just being a bit shit, like, oh, why don't I know how to do this? This is the most natural thing in the world. It should be really easy, and it didn't feel like that. But actually, it turns out, having spoke to thousands of people, no one really feels like that. Everyone feels overwhelmed and thinks that they're doing a terrible job. And they're not. They're doing the best that they can in nearly all cases. So that, again, I would send this chocolate in a jiffy bag, and a note saying, you're amazing, you're doing brilliantly, you're going to be great, it's going to be okay. And the response from people was so disproportionate to almost the effort that I'd put in, that they were so overwhelmed and grateful, and like, I think this was the most thoughtful gift I received. Thank you so much for thinking of me. And I was like, that's weird. Like, it just seemed really natural to me that would be more helpful, but it was so gratefully received that I was like, oh God, that's mad. Like, there's something in this. Why are people just sending flowers? Like, why do people keep sending flowers? Because they're doing it for the same reasons. They're trying to be thoughtful. It's meant to be to say, well done to the woman that's had the baby. But it just didn't work. It didn't make sense to me.
So it's something about the meaningfulness
Mm,
that was making a difference. You were getting all this positive feedback, but you didn't actually start your business by just suddenly starting it.
no.
You started your blog first. So tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I had my first two babies. I've had a third since, but I had my first two children quite close together. So I'd gone back to work in between. And so that the idea of don't buy her flowers kind of was percolating, but I wasn't I was quite happy working part-time, going back to work part-time, but it was like a burning idea that it just kept thinking, why is no one doing this? Like, it just made complete sense. And then having another baby again, and being in that world even more, and people around me having babies, it was like, yeah, there is something in this. But I'd never had a desire to start a business, to be an entrepreneur, and so it was like, I knew I wanted to do something, and the idea for the business was there, and I was kind of figuring that out. But it was like, right, what can I do that's a step towards that? But I'm still working I was 3 days a week working in marketing at the previous company that I was at. And so I was like, what can I do that's a step towards this? And it was actually, it was like a bit of a New Year's resolution. I was like, right, I'm going to start a blog. I'm going to see how other people are finding this. Because also, I think when you're further down the line, it's quite easy to forget. And also, the world has changed quite significantly about how much people talk about motherhood and how that actually feels. And you're not having to maybe put up as much of a brave face of how isn't this the most wonderful thing? And it is the most wonderful. Like my kids are everything, but it's also hard and
Very
exhausting.
stretching,
And
very
yes,
challenging.
yes, it can be challenging, especially when it's new. Um, so I started writing, and actually, I wrote as a kid. Like I went on, I mean, this is how cool I am. I'd gone on creative writing courses in like the school holidays and stuff, and I'd done that kind of thing, and I loved writing, but I hadn't really done it for years. And there was something there which is quite bizarre, really, because obviously I didn't have loads of spare time, but I started writing about motherhood and relationships. And what I really was writing about was the connection that I was feeling with other women that were also talking about how they found it. Or when I would sit with the NCT girls and say, is anyone else like struggling? I just, or does this feel hard for anyone? And you'd have these really deep conversations, and people would be open, and people would look relieved, like really relieved that someone else was saying, I want to kill my husband. And they had felt like that, but didn't know how to voice it, because until then you probably thought this is just meant to be magical. So I was writing, and the blogs at the time, Mumsnet was massive, and they'd have like a blog of the day and stuff. And I kept getting these posts that were being shared like like thousands of times and would go a bit viral. And it was just writing about what I was feeling, and it wasn't attacking my husband. Like he was very on board. It was actually a really helpful way of me explaining how I was feeling, because he would read them. And what I really got from that, I guess, was that other women in my situation, because I know it's going to depend who you are and what you are and everything else, but were found it the same. They found it harder than they're expecting, and also if you share it, it can be funny as well. So rather than it being like, oh God, I'm terrible at this, and feeling really lonely, there's a connection with someone going, oh my God, this is how I feel. Like the rage I used to feel on a Saturday morning. It was always on a Saturday morning. And it's probably because I'd got through Monday to Friday, and then my husband was around on a Saturday, and I felt like he was going to swoop in and everything was going to suddenly be easier. And then it wasn't. Because he probably didn't know what my expectations, but I didn't really know how to communicate what I was feeling. So writing about the Saturday morning row and getting thousands of people going, oh my God, this is what happens in our house. And it was like just observations that people related to, that connected me to people. But what transpired from that is I then like built this community of people, lots of who are still around and supportive on Instagram and stuff, who were in the same boat or had been, and they related to it and they felt heard and seen. And that was amazing, because then so that was in the February, and then it got to November and I launched the website, terrified, held it back for a couple of weeks for no reason other than I was terrified. It just felt really exposing. But then it went live, and all that the community that had supported the blog were sharing it. The website crashed because they were all so behind it. And I didn't know if they would be. I didn't know if people would say, oh, is this a scam? You've been drawing us in with these stories and now you're trying to flog us something. And I'm always very cautious of not being a flogger. That's like, but yeah, so that was amazing.
What I want to come in with here is what a fantastic example of what I would call resonant leadership, because you started sharing your stories. You were being
Right.
vulnerable. You shared warts and all accounts of what was happening. It hit the nail on the head for people emotionally and really, really resonated with them. So
Mm,
I'm not surprised that your community grew really quickly, because I think the time you were talking about two
mm,
2010, 2012, parenthood was still kind of idolized in those days, wasn't it? It's all going to be gorgeous and the
mm,
baby and all this sort of stuff. And yet it is so much more challenging than
mm,
the gloss might suggest. I think you just shared so honestly and authentically. It resonated so strongly. Great, great example, Steph. Thank
mm.
you. So you're starting to talk about moving into the more commercial venture of your business. What was it that sparked you're thinking, right, this is the right time? Or did you not even think that? Did it just kind of
No,
evolve?
so in the May, I left my job because my my husband was Doug was really supportive. You know, I'd done only what 4 months, but I was putting content out, like putting a blog post out every week. This is when blogging was big, although now Substack's there, so it's funny it's come around. And getting that resonance that it was like there is definitely something in this. And actually, London 2012, so the Olympics, which is what I'd gone to EDF Energy to work on, was over. So that, you know, things had changed there. Well, I wasn't really particularly interested in utilities. And so my kind of role in the Olympic sponsorship had finished. So, yeah, I suppose things came together. And so I gave my notice in. So I finished in the May. And then it was like the summer holidays. And I remember we coming back from holiday and being like, right, I'm like geared up. This is going to happen now. And then like the kids got ill and it kind of felt like it really dragged. And obviously I had no income at this time. So I was lucky that Doug earns reasonably well. So like we were okay. But and I wasn't spending as much and we had less childcare. So yeah, and that was so it was a that was like now I have to do it because I've left my job. Like this has to happen. But and then it was getting the website built, looking at product, just you know, finding out what courier we were going to use. Like, and it felt really overwhelming. I think a good message for anyone that's thinking of doing their own thing is you kind of have to do it like one step at it's one step at a time because when you look at the full picture, which is like, right, I've got to decide on products, packaging, what courier are we using, how is the accounting going to work? Like, there's so many elements to getting started. Um, and so it was like, right, well, this week I'm going to focus on packaging. Like, yeah, I had to be really focused. And then, and also, you know, once you've done one thing, you've done it, move on, next thing. Because I think, and I think it's probably something that women do more than men, possibly. And another reason why it's potentially harder is that you're trying to get it right and perfect. And I remember speaking to a guy called Ben Jones, who is married to a really good friend of mine, and he was one of the founders of Graze.com. And I showed him my logo and was like, oh, you know, what do you think? And he's like, yeah, great, done, tick, move on. And I was like, what? You know, because in my head, it's the logo. I've got to spend ages on this. And he was like, you can change stuff later, but don't dwell. If you sit and think about this for the next 3 weeks, you're just holding yourself back. And that's was a really important lesson because you can, and actually until you launch something you don't know what people are going to make of it. You don't know what tweak, like, and it could be something really simple. I mean, for me the feedback quite quickly after we launched was, well, I want to send this gift to a man, or I want to send this gift to somebody for a birthday, and it's gifts for new mums, so can you do that? And I wouldn't have known that until I've launched. And then suddenly what we could do and the potential market was considerably bigger than what I'd started at.
Yes, because you started
Yeah.
very niche. So that, you know, I think often businesses get anxious about niching too much. But I hear you niched and very quickly it spread
Yeah,
organically.
we kept the messaging with gifts for new mums. I think was pretty central for the first couple of years because I think you have to establish yourself as something, and that was that where it had come from, and that's what really resonated with people. Like there was a real meaning behind what we were doing. It wasn't just a gift company that's selling for lots of different occasions, and actually that idea of thoughtfulness and the fact that you can put together a bespoke package, and that's 70% of our say our B2C sales are people want to put together something bespoke. They want to spend the time to do that. They want to include the message that we then hand write. Like that is an engagement piece that you want from your consumers, I guess, and your customers. Um, but I wouldn't have known any of that until we got going.
Yes. And so that brings us on to your customers, what you're
Mm,
just saying there, in that you have really built your business so strongly around your customer, which I hear comes from your marketing roots in terms of
mm,
being very customer focused. So I hear that you are really tuned in and sitting in your customers' shoes. And you just mentioned how personal you keep it, handwritten notes. Now that you've been acquired and you're owned
mhm,
by a much bigger organization, how are
mhm.
you going to maintain that level of empathy and care as you scale the business?
Yeah, well, I think what's been the acquisition, so we're in March now. The acquisition was in November. So it's still all quite new, but you don't know. I think if you're acquired, you don't know. And I had heard so many horror stories, but it's been amazing because they are very respectful of don't buy her flowers. They're like, this is what you do, this is your, those customers, those gifts. They're not trying to change that. And so what I've got from the acquisition is more resource and more support and more funding behind the business, but the team remains the same. The core team, the warehouse team, um, my customer service, all of that stuff is retained. And it might be that things evolve in the future, but I think it's been really refreshing. I feel really lucky that that's been the focus, and it's not, well, let's get rid of this and scrap that. And it's like, no, this is what you do, and these are the reasons why we have really good things like in our metrics. Our return rate for customers, our conversion from people who receive a gift to becoming a customer is good. Like, those things come from the quality and the care that's gone into it. Like, our NPS score is 70 something, like it's really high. So that's all part of what we've built, and now it's kind of, how do we scale it? And that's, I guess, my job is kind of the gatekeeper of trying to retain the brand and the messaging and all the things that are really important to us. And actually, it was Mother's Day, and I was down at the warehouse writing tag messages because it was really busy. But writing the tag messages and what people are saying to each other is such a good way to ground me back to what was behind the business. Why did we start it? Because the what people are saying to each other is the core bit, right? So they're putting messages of love and thoughtfulness and apologies, and I'm so sorry that you're having such a difficult time, you're going to be okay. That reassurance that I mentioned earlier for new mums, that's what we're seeing every day. But obviously I'm not involved in tag messages every day, so that's always a really useful way to look back at what do we do. And that it's really powerful, like the things that people are saying to each other, and they've chosen us to be a small part of that gifting that they want to send, and that message they want to give, and that empathy that they want to give to someone. That's really powerful,
Incredibly powerful.
and it's core of what we do, and why it's different to some other gifting companies, I think.
And also, I'm thinking if I was the business acquiring you, I've acquired you because of those
Right,
values and
exactly.
because of the quality of service. That's what's contributed to your success.
Yeah.
So it would be a bit bonkers to actually then try and I can't even say the word, put it put it into some sort of process that might knock out the
Yeah,
personal element.
exactly. And I think that's, but again, you don't know that, and you do hear so many horror stories of people that have, where founders have been crushed out of their business, and it's changed beyond recognition, all that stuff. And I had to go into it quite open that to what might change, but what's really reassuring is that core, it is the value. Yeah, just as you said, that's why we're here.
Absolutely. That's what helped you be so successful as a business. So you mention that, getting into the warehouse over the
Mhm,
weekend, writing those
mhm.
notes yourself is part of what you do as a leader. And, you're heading up the whole business. So you're kind of the figurehead for the business and you're having to oversee everything. There's something there about you can't always go into the
Yeah.
detail, but I'm hearing that you do go into the detail at times and it helps keep you grounded.
Mhm.
I'd like to hear more about what you have learned about leading a business so rapidly. And also, you took it through COVID where you saw it
Mhm.
expand. You saw it post-COVID
Yeah.
where it shrank and you had to start navigating and be agile
Mhm.
in how you dealt with that. Tell us more about your own growth as a leader and what you've learned about
Oh,
leadership.
so much. Um, I think, I mean, you mentioned that we had COVID, and that was this massive growth for us, and that was a big deal to have I mean, we grew 600%, but year on year by the end of 2020. And then it was like, is this going to stay? Are we going to stay at this level, or is this, and it obviously it did for 2 years. It was a lot longer than we had anticipated. And then coming off the back of that, there was a decline. I think most online businesses saw a decline. And so that was really challenging. So I think from a leadership point of view, that's probably when I had to learn the most, because driving it forward and working with the team, and I guess delegating and having a great team, I think that's feels more natural. And but then when you have to still be doing all those things, but you're internally, nervous about the business, you're worried about stuff, you've got financial pressure, that's really difficult. Especially, three of my team, my brother's just recently left the business, but three of the team are family and really good friends that I've known since I was 11. So that adds another layer, because they know, they know that it was a really tough time, but you're also trying to protect them from some of that, because that's not fair to them. They're going to work. It's not their business.
How did you manage yourself through that?
Uh, it was really hard, if I'm honest. It was really hard. And I know it was a low point for me and for my husband as well, because it was so difficult. The financial stress of that um, was really difficult. And I had quite a lot of anxiety. And what I'm finding now is I'm in this real adjustment period, because it was a good couple of years of feeling very anxious, and not really knowing what to do. And actually, we grew the B2B side of the business, which I'm sure we'll come on to, but that had kind of saved us really. So my husband now is like, you were so resilient, like you've turned it around, you did the, but it didn't feel like that at the time. It just felt really, really hard, like waking up and thinking, oh God. Or if I'd been asleep, not sleeping particularly well, but waking up and going, how am I going to do this? And because we had taken loans and we had various debt, that I couldn't just stop. So where, my mum would say, oh, it can't be worth it, Steph. This is too hard. You're too sad. Stop. And it's like, but you can't just stop. If you've got a team and you've got money and you've got responsibilities and debts and things, you can't just jack it all in. Or you can, but you've got a lot to lose. So yeah, there was a lot of hard slog involved. And even now, I think I've been in that kind of fight or flight stage for quite a long time. So although now everything is safe and it's okay, and financially everything's okay, I'm still adjusting to that. So at the weekend I find it very hard to switch off, because I'd spent the last couple of years still, doing stuff. It was like, there's more I can do, there's more I can do in the evenings and the weekends. So that's still an adjustment, if I'm really honest.
It sounds very like it was very
It was
stressful.
really stressful. It was awful. I wouldn't like, and there were loads of times when I was like, I just don't, this isn't, none of the bits that I went into this for were there, because it was so hard. So what's really lovely now is I'm getting to think and be creative and, look at the opportunities again, rather than like, how are we going to pay the bills, which is really hard. But I think I have to be honest, because I think most business owners have been through that at some point, either in the business they're in now or in a previous business, and then they do it differently. And there's loads of things I would do differently. But yeah, so I learned a lot about leadership, and I don't know if I was always brilliant at it. Like I am very open and honest, so I couldn't always hide that it was hard.
Could you share one key thing that you think you would do differently if it happened again?
Oh, I think when you're growing, when you're on the up, that's when you should be looking at what you're going to do next. And that's when you should be looking at it, whether that's raising money, whether that's looking to sell or get acquired and stay in the business, whatever that is. It's very hard to do when you've got out of the peak and you're potentially in decline. It's just a lot harder to do.
So there's something about it, it reminds, I'm using the analogy because I go cycling. When you're going down that hill and it
Yeah.
all feels great because you're
Yeah.
whooshing, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Remember, there's a hill coming that you're going to have to
Yeah,
climb
and
up.
there is. I don't think anyone, and to be honest, I was very lucky in that from when we launched, and because I ran the business from home, I didn't have overheads particularly, and we did it really gradually. So after a couple of years, I took on a warehouse space in Gloucestershire. My brother came to work with me, so I had like one salary and the warehouse to pay for, but we added really incrementally. So it wasn't like I raised a load of money, went, right, I've got 400 grand to spend. It was one thing at a time. And we always did it when we knew we had enough money coming in. So we knew that the sales would cover the costs, and that was all really careful and predictable. And it stayed like that until COVID. Then it was this ridiculous growth. And it was only after that that it became really hard. And I think a lot of people probably have experienced that hardship a lot earlier than us, because it wasn't, the risk wasn't there, because we'd had this really controlled, predictable. I mean, I don't know that my husband would agree, because he probably felt a lot more stressed than I did, because at times I wasn't earning, I didn't take a salary initially, so he had to earn all the money. But yeah, I think that is a, it's really hard, because I didn't go into it with a business plan. I didn't go into it going, oh, in 5 years time I want to sell for this much and I want to do it like that. And I don't think that is always the right thing to do. For lots of people, it's it might be that you're looking for a lifestyle business, it might be that you're looking to grow something and sell it, but it's hard, it's not always easy to know that unless you're going into it in a way that you have that experience.
So tell us about what, the business term is the pivot. You pivoted
Mm,
into B2B rather than just
mm.
business to customer.
Yeah.
So tell us about how that evolved.
So when we started, obviously B2B wasn't in my head at all. And actually, I met with someone yesterday who was our first B2B client. So in 2015, so in the only a few months after we launched, someone from Page Group recruitment contacted me and said, oh, she was a customer, and she said, would you do gifts for like maternity gifts for people returning from maternity leave? So it was part of their HR strategy, really thoughtful. And we were talking about it yesterday. And I was like, I returned to work twice after my first two kids. And it's not that you're expecting like a fanfare, but I guess an understanding, some empathy as to what that might feel like, because having been through it, it rocks you going back to work, leaving your baby, feeling, can I still do this? Your identity's changed, you shifted, or you don't quite feel yourself. Returning to work is quite a big deal. So this company acknowledging that and having events when they, every couple of months they get everyone that's returned from maternity leave together to bring them back into the business, to update them on what's been happening in the business, to offer support, but also they would give them a gift. So it's not expense, it's not a big expense for a large company, but it's really thoughtful. And apparently, I mean, so 10 years on, they're still doing it, and the gifts are really well received, and people still talk about them years later. So that was the kind of the start of that. And we had a few customers, but really it was people coming to us. So companies coming to us saying, could you do gifts for this? Could you add some branding to this? Could you add a logo on your tag? That kind of thing. And so we were doing that, but it was during COVID that the B2B stuff really grew, because companies couldn't have parties and Christmas parties and stuff. So the Christmases in that time were massive, but also the hybrid working and people working from home and sometimes having completely remote teams and needing to bring them together. So we've got clients who will, when they have like an away day, they might do them online, but they'll send everyone a gift so that everyone's getting something. And maybe that's got something to do with whatever their meeting is about, or it's a breakfast meeting, so they want some breakfasty bits in there. And that really evolved, but it was then that period where we could see the B2C sales were less than they had been. And we actively went after the B2B market, and we'd learned so much. And I think what is critical is that it's still about thoughtfulness. It's still, that's the core bit. So it's not, I think corporate gifting is pretty rubbish in a lot of ways, and it's slapping a brand on something, slapping a logo on it, and it can be tat that nobody really wants. And it's often a tick box for lots of companies. But I would say the clients that we have, they're looking to communicate, connect. They want some messaging in there, and they do, and we can help them bring that to life. So we have a company that we work with. Well, I mean, loads of the companies that we work with, but they'll come to us with a brief more, where they'll say we're trying to reach, I don't know, maybe it's an accounting company and they're trying to reach accountants, and they want to engage them and for it to communicate messaging about the company. So it's not from Don't Buy Her Flowers, it's from whoever that company is, in terms of how it looks. We can change the packaging, we can change the tissue and ribbon to match their brand colors and add their logo. So the first thing that the recipient sees is something from that company. But you've also then got your handwritten message, you've got the products we would choose to work with them to what do they want, what do you want your recipient to feel? If it's a maternity returner, that's one thing. If it's a new starter, so we work with lots of clients doing onboarding gifts. And those are great because then we also can help put a process in place. So I think what happens a lot in companies with gifting is it's done as a not knee jerk, but it's like, oh, we need to get a gift for someone, they've had a baby, or I don't know, we've got a new starter, we should give them a branded notebook. And it's reliant on somebody to think of it and the team to remember, and different teams will do it differently, and where's the budget come from, whereas we have processes and account management, so we can help companies to put those in place so that it's a process, so that every new starter gets a gift, or everyone that has a baby gets a gift, or like if people are unwell or they've been bereaved, like all of those things we can support them with. So that has massive potential. Like we've already, it now operates at about 50% of our revenue is now B2B. And again, that's really just a couple of us going after that market, and using our contacts and working, and getting lots of returning customers.
The theme that's coming through this is the thoughtfulness, the compassion,
Yeah.
the being intentional and connected with people, whether you're connecting with people in your business or you're
Mm.
connecting with your friends, your family.
Yeah.
It's all about that thoughtfulness and
Yeah, and
connection.
I think that's probably the shift that's happened as well in the last 11 years. Well, I think probably prior to companies understanding it, people have understood it. The discussions of mental health, the understanding that of being a support to somebody, or that if somebody dies, you can mention that person. You don't all hush up and not mention the fact that that person died, because actually that's not supportive. And I think that has benefited us because that's what we do, and people want to acknowledge someone and be empathetic. But companies also now play a role in that, so it's not good enough to not acknowledge those things. If you're, well, if you're a good company and you are connecting well and you have a HR strategy that is to look after your employees, you are probably wanting to connect with them about all of those things, and that maybe didn't exist before.
Yeah, and I'm a question that's coming through for me for the companies that you work with.
Mm.
Do you think they're becoming more loving towards the people that work for them?
Yeah, and I guess looking at like how can we retain, like it's a business, it's got to have make business sense ultimately. So a really good example is when my husband was unwell. He had cancer when I was pregnant with our first baby, and he his workplace at the time gave me access to the company car account so that I could get to and from the hospital, because I was 20 weeks pregnant and he was in London having an operation and was in for a couple of weeks. And they really took care of me. They put the night that he had the operation, they put me up in a hotel near the hospital. They offered it, and I didn't have to, but it was just that it was this there. And I think of that company so fondly still, 15 years on, because it was just really thoughtful. They were acknowledging that this was probably a really shitty time, which it was. What could they do? That's what they could do. And it doesn't have to be as grand gesture as that, but and you want, again, from a business point of view, you want your employees' family to be supportive of their work, right? You could look at it really cynically, but we won't. But like that's part of it.
Well, I suppose to me, what I'm hearing, there's a business gain to be had, but there's also huge human
Exactly.
gain
And the
by
both
caring.
go together. And I think that
Yeah.
that's the key bit. And I think if you just looked at one and you talked about the human caring, then that doesn't, it's got to make business sense, right? But when you put them together, it absolutely does.
Okay. Well, let's move on then, because it's fascinating to hear
Mm.
how your business has grown, how you've reinvented it when you've been challenged by it. You're now in your next chapter.
Mm.
Your business has been acquired. What was that process like for you?
Quite long and quite hard because there's lots of uncertainty. So I'm thinking back to the summer we'd had this. I mean, the acquirers have been amazing. So they're not. they didn't make it difficult. It's just quite a difficult process. You've got to go through due diligence. You've got to put loads of documents together. You've got to go back and forth negotiating on numbers and all of that stuff. And I've never done that before. So I've again learned loads. This is the running theme. I'm always learning. That's what I say that to the team. Like, oh, we've learned a lot, haven't we? Yeah, it was just a new process, and I think we started the conversation probably in June and we signed in November, and that's actually quite quick, is my understanding now. We also had conversations with people who were time wasters or wanted to get me for a really crappy deal, and because we were in a vulnerable position where it had been really tough for the last couple of years, that's really tricky again, where if you're in a strong position and you're not like desperately looking for a solution, is going to be better than if you've got no, what's the word, you've got nothing in the ball's not in your court. So it was mostly pulling together documents and stuff, and again, we actually, because we had grown and we were, turning over a couple of £1 million, it's not like we were tiny. So we did have things in place and documentation and all that stuff. But we're not a big company with a massive team and a finance department and a HR department. So you don't necessarily have all those documents. So there's just quite a lot of time involved. And at the same time, you're trying to run the business and keep it, growing. We're still looking at growth. So that's quite hard.
How did you make sure throughout all of that that the values of the business remained intact?
Well, I guess the team didn't know that the conversations were happening, so they are all still were absolutely on it. But yeah, the business at the point that we're at, like we know what we do, like what we were doing for the last few years, we had got to a really good place that we know what we do and we do it really well. So that was quite safe, if you like, whilst I was kind of looking at the acquisition piece. But yeah, it was tough. It was working, as I say, evenings, weekends, just trying to hold it all together. But I think running a business is tough. I don't think it's an easy option by any stretch.
And what do you feel being a leader now of a potentially business? Who knows where the business
Mm,
could go to now?
mm.
How do you feel about leadership now? How's that changed for
Oh,
you?
much more exciting. It's really nice to not, nice is too weak a word, but it feels really good to have to have got us through this, actually. Like I've turned to my husband fairly regularly in the last few weeks and going, I think we did it. I think we did it, because we actually, it's 2 years ago, Doug and I went to Prague, and obviously it's when you're anxious and under financial stress, it's quite hard to also maintain a relationship. So we went to Prague for a weekend away and we had an amazing weekend. And for whatever reason, I managed to really relax, which was great because I had not been great at relaxing for a while. And we made that decision and we were like, yeah, this is. So I think it was the January and we were like, right, come September, we're going to try and find a broker. Um, and so again, you're talking like a year and a half before everything had happened. But we had that decision together, that we were really clear that that was what was best for the family, that was what was best for me, that was what was best for the business. And that was really helpful to have that, partnership. We were really, really clear, because also when it's actually happening, you can get distracted, or so you have a really good month and like, do we really need to do this? Or, there's lots of going back and forth. And it was like, no, we are really clear why we're doing this. And a big part of it for me was that I've got three amazing kids. They're 8, 13, and 15. They still need me at the moment. But when you have someone in their teens, you suddenly start to go, oh, this isn't forever. Like they are going to leave. And what had felt when they're small as forever, like this is the slog that we're in, the grind, suddenly like, oh, it's going to change. The dynamic of one of them won't be here, then two of them won't be here. I mean, I'm sure they'll come and go. One of them said the other day, I think I'm just going to live with you forever. But it won't be the five of us, and I don't want to have missed it, because I felt so anxious and so focused on the business. And you can't not focus, if you're running a business, it has to be, it is a priority. I didn't want it to be a priority over my children all the time. I wanted to be able to separate those things and not feel that strain. And so, and I think we've managed to get away. They've managed to get away. I managed to get through it unscathed because my older one is more aware that it's been quite tough. My middle one, I had a conversation with her and she was like, so why are you selling the business? And I was like, well, it's been really hard. She's like, has it? Like completely oblivious. And the younger one's only 8, so he has no idea. But he has said a couple of times, can you come and sit with me without your laptop? And it cuts you deep, because they're aware that I have had to work really hard. So yeah, that's a big part of it, I think. And that, again, that would be different for everybody, what success is to you, what does that look like? But I want to have a balance. I don't want to look back and think I've missed it. I've missed my family growing up.
Wow. So what I'm hearing is not only, in terms of setting up your business, getting it going from that whole thoughtfulness, noticing piece, but also a role model in wanting to make sure you have that balance between work and family and creating a wonderful environment for them, as well as creating a really fantastic business.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard, and I think women especially, that's a tough job because women do the majority of the domestic load.
Right. Well, that brings us to our next subject. So, because I'm just going to say to our listeners that when we were doing our prep calls, Steph had so much to talk about. And one of the things that we touched on was the mental load. So, we are complete for our episode today. Thank you, Steph, so much for joining us to talk about your business and how you grew it and all the challenges that you navigated along the way. But I know that you're going to rejoin us for a second episode where we are going to exclusively talk about the mental load, because we women have to carry 93% of the mental load. But also, not only that, how you navigate your relationships with our male partners, our male colleagues, to help smooth that out, because I think that's a conversation that we don't have enough. So I'll be really delighted if you join me again, Steph, to come and talk about that. Thank you so much for listening to the She Leads Collective podcast. If this episode resonated with you, follow the show or share it with a friend and leave a quick review below. Or leave us a comment. Change happens through conversation, so let's keep this one going. Listen out for the next episode and join me as we keep lifting the lid on the stories that matter. Take care and keep leading with heart.